In this video, we're going to talk about the many properties of water, and we'll learn why water is such an important molecule in chemistry. So for the next few minutes, we'll talk about water. And water is an amazing molecule. It has so many unique properties because of its dipole nature. It's so important for life. If you think about us, we're mostly water. Most of the Earth's surface is covered with water. Most reactions occur within solution, dissolved in water. And due to the fact that water is polar, it allows for so many essential biological interactions. And we'll be talking about those properties over the next few minutes. So the first property of water is that water molecules stick to one another in a process or a phenomenon known as cohesion. So cohesive means that you work together well, you stick together. So water molecules stick to one another, and that's cohesion. And this cohesion leads to increased surface tension. And I've kind of demonstrated that here. So the hydrogen bonding between water molecules creates that surface tension, and it's hard to break the surface of water. And if you've ever accidentally done a belly flop, you know how hard water can feel when you can't break the surface tension easily. And some bugs can actually walk on water due to this property. So they can distribute their weight in such a way that they are not breaking that surface tension. Instead, they bend the water, but they don't actually go under the water. Now, adhesion is the property that water molecules can stick to other polar molecules. So this allows for a property or phenomenon called capillary action. So I have here in this diagram a straw, a glass tube inside a beaker of water. And if you've ever noticed this with a regular straw too, if you look at the level of the liquid in the straw, it'll be a little bit higher than the surface of the water in the container. So this is because of capillary action. So the water molecules are being attracted to and pulled up the straw or the glass tube. Now, this phenomenon, along with cohesion, is what allows plants to be able to take water in and transport it through the xylem. So if you remember about transport in plants from grade 11 biology, water molecules are drawn in through the roots from the soil, and then through climbing the xylem, so being attracted to the walls of the xylem and also being held together by each water molecule, the water pulls up the xylem to the leaf where the pressure has decreased through evaporation. So that is adhesion. Water is considered the universal solvent because more substances can dissolve in water than any other liquid. Ionic compounds can dissociate into ions and mix and mingle within the solution. Polar molecules can dissolve and nonpolar molecules can, and that's because nonpolar molecules are hydrophobic. Because of this property, water is a great mode of transport in the body because our blood plasma is mostly water. So blood is almost 50% water. And that means that we can transport dissolved ions, we can transport dissolved oxygen, hormones, everything gets transported through the blood. Now the problem with water being a universal solvent is people used to think, and still do think, that the solution to pollution is dilution. If you have something you don't want anymore, just pour it down the drain and it'll dissolve and spread out, and it won't, practically won't even, harm the lake or the river that you're depositing it in. But cumulatively, that would be a huge problem, and we have damaged many ecosystems because of this principle. Not a very good principle to live by. Water also has a very high heat capacity, and what that means is that it can absorb a lot of heat before the temperature of water changes. So it can absorb a lot of heat before the temperature rises by 1 degree, and it also has to lose a lot of heat before the temperature decreases by 1 degree. And this is due to water's hydrogen bonding. And it's a really great thing because it prevents lakes from freezing over the winter, and it keeps our lakes and rivers pretty much a relative consistent temperature. If it got really hot and water could change at the same rate as our air temperature, fish and wildlife would be freezing and overheating all of the time, whereas lakes and rivers pretty much stay relatively the same. Their temperature changes are very gradual. And also, it allows us to cool ourselves through sweating. So when we sweat, we bring water to the surface, and then that water will evaporate. And when the water evaporates, it carries some of the heat away, and then we feel cooler. So that is the principle of water having a high heat capacity. Water is also transparent, which lets light travel through it. And that's really important because it allows plants to live underwater, so light can penetrate through the lake and then plants can still photosynthesize. It also allows us to be able to see through the layer of water that covers our eye. That would be a problem if we couldn't see. Ice also floats because ice has a very open structure, and that allows it to become less dense than water, so it floats on top of the water. And this is really important because it allows for wildlife survival over the winter time. So what happens is the lake doesn't freeze from the bottom up and then become one solid mass of ice. Instead, the water freezes at the top, and the whole lake doesn't completely freeze solid. There's still water below the surface, and that allows for plants and organisms to live under that surface. It also is very helpful when it becomes springtime because the ice is at the surface of the lake and the sun's rays will penetrate it and help melt it, and when it becomes warmer in the daytime. The final property of water that we'll talk about today is water is amphiprotic. So what that means is water can act as an acid or a base depending on its environment. So if an acid is added to water, then water will act as a base to help buffer or neutralize that acid that's being added. And if a base is added to water, then water will act as an acid to help buffer that addition of base. So it prevents water from having huge fluctuations of pH when an acid or a base is added to it. And that is a relatively brief overview of our biochemistry introduction. Over the next few days and weeks, we'll be looking into depth at carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, enzymes, and so on. And we'll become experts at this stuff.